The year was 1849. In a small village in the eastern United States lived a 22-year-old young farmer named Thomas Miller. Thomas worked on a small piece of land that had belonged to his family for generations. Every sunrise brought hope, and every sunset marked another day of hard work. But that year, everything changed. A terrible drought swept across the countryside. The fields turned brown. The rivers began to dry up. The crops failed. And the family's savings slowly disappeared. Every day became a struggle just to survive. One afternoon, a traveler rode into the village on horseback. People gathered around him, curious to hear his news. The traveler spoke with excitement. "Gold has been discovered in California. They say the rivers are filled with gold. Anyone willing to make the journey could become rich." The entire village fell silent. Some people laughed, others dreamed. But Thomas couldn't stop thinking about those words. Then he answered, "The greatest treasure was never the gold. It was the courage to keep moving forward when every reason told me to give up." Many years passed. Thomas grew old. One peaceful evening, he sat on the porch of his farmhouse, surrounded by his grandchildren. In his hands rested the old brass compass his father had given him before his journey. The children listened carefully as he smiled and said, "This compass didn't just show me the road to California. It reminded me that every dream begins with one brave step, no matter how difficult the journey becomes. Never stop believing, never stop moving forward." The grandchildren smiled. The sun slowly disappeared behind the golden fields. A gentle breeze carried the sound of rustling wheat across the countryside. And as the sky turned orange and gold, Thomas looked toward the horizon with peace in his heart, because he finally understood, and sometimes the greatest treasure in life isn't what you find. It's the person you become while searching for it. The end. Over the following months, Thomas continued working carefully. Little by little, he found several more small pieces of gold. He never became one of the richest men in America, but he earned enough money to completely change his future. When Thomas finally returned home, his village welcomed him with smiles. Instead of buying expensive clothes or living a luxurious life, he bought fertile farmland. He built a larger farmhouse. He hired workers from struggling families. Together they planted new crops. Within a few years, the dry fields had become beautiful, green farmland once again. Children laughed through the fields. Families found work. Hope returned to the village. Years later, people often visited Thomas and asked, "What was the greatest treasure you ever found in California?" Thomas smiled quietly. Holding the small gold nugget in one hand, he placed his other hand over his heart. A month later, his money was almost gone. His clothes were worn out. His hands were covered with cuts. His hope slowly began to fade. One cold evening, Thomas sat beside a dying campfire. Looking into the flames, he whispered, "Tomorrow, I'll go home." The next morning, before leaving, he decided to search one final time. He walked to a quiet bend in the river where very few miners worked. The water flowed gently beneath the morning sunlight. Thomas knelt down. He scooped gravel into his gold pan. Slowly, he washed away the dirt. Then suddenly, a tiny flash of golden light sparkled beneath the water. Thomas stopped breathing. With trembling hands, he lifted the pan closer. There it was, a small piece of real gold. For a moment, he couldn't believe his eyes. Months of pain, months of disappointment, months of sacrifice had finally been rewarded. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The journey became harder with every passing mile. Violent storms destroyed camps. Food became scarce. Horses grew weak. Many travelers became sick. Some gave up and returned home. Others disappeared into the wilderness, never to be seen again. But Thomas refused to quit. Nearly 3 exhausting months later, he finally reached California. Before him stretched one of the largest mining camps he had ever imagined. Thousands of people filled the valley. Canvas tents covered the hillsides. Smoke rose from campfires. Miners stood knee-deep in freezing rivers, washing gravel from sunrise until sunset. Thomas immediately joined them. Every morning before dawn, he carried his gold pan to the river. Every evening, he returned with nothing. 1 week passed. Nothing. 2 weeks passed. Still nothing. That night, while sitting beside a small oil lamp, he made the biggest decision of his life. He would travel west. He would search for gold. Early the next morning, Thomas packed a small leather bag. His mother placed a small Bible into his hands. His father gave him an old brass compass that had guided him through many difficult journeys. His father looked into his eyes and said, "Son, this compass will help you find your way, but your courage will decide whether you reach your destination." Thomas hugged his parents one last time. Then he climbed onto his faithful horse and began the longest journey of his life. For weeks he traveled across endless plains, rocky mountains, scorching deserts, rushing rivers, and dense forests. Along the road he met hundreds of travelers, farmers, blacksmiths, merchants, carpenters. Entire families traveled together in covered wagons. Each person carried the same dream: to find gold.